Hi, this is David Aben, founder of The Bucket, and your host for this edition of The Bucket Podcast. I'm talking today with someone whose fundraising ride has raised more than $650 million for cancer research. He is none other than Billy Starr, founder and executive director of the Pan Mass Challenge. Welcome, Billy. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, David. Good to be here.
So the ride was about a month and a half ago. Is this a downtime for you at all? What's happening at this point?
There is no downtime. The pressure's off, but we're a year-round operation. I remember my friend in the ski industry making comments like people say, "So what do you do the rest of the year?" There are 11 of us full-time now, and over 350,000 people donating to what this year will be a $60 million goal to just correct. By the time this thing plays, maybe we'll be over $700 million since 1980. This is our 40th year. There is no downtime. This is time to strike with sponsorship, innovation on the weekend. We're going through an alignment here, a strategic business plan. It doesn't end.
Wow.
And that's a good thing.
So how many riders rode this year?
Over 6,800 on 12 different routes in 46 towns.
Wow. And how many of those are alumni, if that's the right word?
82%.
Wow.
So if you were to take away the first-year rider, the average guy or gal in this event has ridden for over almost 9 years. I mean, you won't find that kind of fidelity anywhere.
So what is harder, ramping up for 2020 or ramping up for 1990?
That's an interesting question. It's hard, when people go overnight sensation. I mean, everything comes in its time. I can say in 1990, that was the first year I have. 1989 was the first year I knew we were going to give $1 million in a year. And my mantra that year was, which we put on the jerseys, was be one in a million. Ramping up for 2020, where this year we have a $60 million goal. And whatever we give will be the biggest check ever in the history of the Dana-Farber. That may be hard to repeat, but we've only not grown in 1 year out of 40. So we're all about the growth and staying true to our mission, which is giving these doctors the funds to go get the cures for cancer. So we have growth programs. We're going to be introducing a legacy program. We have growth opportunity in our winter cycle, our kids program, our Sunday ride 2550, which had about 800 people in it, but could accommodate 2,500. That's a relatively new program. But this year in particular, we're putting a freeze on the traditional rides, how many people we can take at the Mass Maritime Academy and the Provincetown finish lines. So when you can't increase numbers of riders, these multi-million-dollar incrementals get tougher to achieve.
Yeah, because you seem like the kind of person who kind of gets a rush out of leaning into the wind. And so
I've heard myself described as such.
So I would think in 1990, where you had the challenge of, is this, we're going to make this real, but they're just different challenges that come up every year, right?
There are always challenges. I mean, I suppose if I were to take from the genesis of the idea itself to the end of the inaugural year, where in that moment alone I said, this is it for me. This is my line of the sand. This is what I'm going to do. In 1980, when I created the PMC, I knew as a logistical kind of guy what to do, but there was no plan for 1981. And that probably was the critical moment. So that's it. I'm going to try and make this thing big, great, and significant.
How many riders in 1980?
36.
Wow. You said this is a year-long thing. How much is it a full-time job? This is what you do.
Yes.
There is no downtime.
There are 11 people in this office who are doing business development, marketing, finance, administration, kids rides. I got a kids rides program that has 4,000 kids in 37 towns. Those rides did $1 million this year.
Can you talk
we are
a
now
bit?
doing a spinning program at Fenway Park, which is in our fourth or fifth year. you know.
Is that a virtual?
There's that as well.
Okay.
You know, that remains as a potential growth program. But it's interesting that the kind of money we raise is done by a man or woman whose commitment goes beyond average. And the PMC weekend is tough to replicate. It's been written by people who've studied it. If you want the PMC experience, you got to buy into the model. And, you know, that this is nothing any of them could do on their own. And sometimes we want to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. I don't have to tell you that the average person at this event is not average. And many of them can have whatever infrastructure they want in their life, but they can't have this. A community of decent, like-minded people who are dedicated to funding the cures for cancer and doing it with bicycles as a catalyst. So the synergy of physical, emotional, and spiritual that at the end of the year gets distilled into this massive check, which represents all our hopes, going to a world-class institution, the Dana-Farber.
Yeah, it is incredible. Now, if someone wanted to hear your story, they can certainly go to your website. And I read the book Closer by the Mile by Ken Brack, and people can learn about that. But for people listening who don't know it, can you tell us how this all started, how you started the ride to raise money, and why?
Yeah, and I would say Closer by the Mile is more the PMC story than it is necessarily even my own biographical story. But,
right.
You know, I lost in quick succession. I lost my uncle, then my mother, then my cousin to cancer. I was just graduating college, and it definitely derailed me. I was from a close family. I saw the changes in my father. You know, I was a 60s kid who was off to Nepal when my whole world changed. And I drove a truck and went to the hospital 3 times a day with my father. And I lived at home and my world shrunk. I mean, and it did. And I started to see life very differently. I felt more fragile. And I never gave a lot of thought, which of course, you know, when I talk to young people today about like, you know, when they said, so you were a political science major, so you're a lawyer, right? And I remember once being picked up by a woman hitchhiking, another old antiquated phrase. She picked me up. That doesn't happen anymore. And when she said that to me, and I said, no, I don't think, she goes, what a waste. That was her comment. She was only 2-3 years younger than me. You know, like, what had I done with my college career? And I think it's fair to say none of us were thinking, or not many of us were thinking too much of what, I just assumed it would work out. And then suddenly the gears were not working out. I just, you know, my whole sense of self and global purpose was, you know, changed. It wasn't an overnight epiphany. I mean, I bounced around for another 6-7 years before, and did a lot of things. And I can make the back narrative about how being an athlete and a journalist and doing sales, all these things came forward in who I am and perhaps where my success lies. But go tell that to anybody, this was a business plan? Not even close.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story, and I have read about it in terms of this nice little package, but it sounds like it wasn't that clean a package.
Or tidy. It wasn't tidy, but I think it's looking back, you know, at some point somebody's got to have the belief in something to stay with it. I'm sure there have been a lot of great ideas that either couldn't be executed or were prematurely abandoned. This was probably a pretty great idea that took a long time to flesh out. But, you know, by the time I hired my first full-time employee 10 years in, and I joke because I don't deserve a lot of credit. If I were more of a businessman, I would have hired somebody sooner. I was building culture, but I was probably retarding my own growth at the same time by not bringing somebody. I worked for 15 years out of my father's house. You know, I never carried debt. That was both a personal thing I learned from my father, not exactly the way you build a business. But at the same time, I was becoming very good at getting people to contribute. Donuts, oranges, trucks, professional skills, not cash. But I was building out this event and getting it paid for. All the ingredients that you would need for that in those days, 1 year only, Springfield, 220 miles, and then moving permanently to Sturbridge in 1981. And we stayed one route only until 1997, where I started seeing my friends were having children. They weren't in the shape they used to be, but they'd become decent fundraisers. I didn't want to lose them. They had street cred, and it wasn't about the mileage anymore. The mission was moving more to the center. In 1980, the PMC was absolutely looked as an extreme hard guy event, and I consider one of the great ironies of life of not only getting older, but that 40 years later, riding 200 miles, we're all older and nobody sees it as a big deal anymore. I mean, not that it isn't hard, but in the world of ultra events, it's nothing.
Right.
And the technology's better, the nutrition's better, the clothing's better. I mean, that which we didn't know while I was building this event is legend. Right. I mean, I say that with great humor because I attracted a person who had the ability to laugh at themselves while keeping their eye on the mission of what we were there to do. We were elevating ourselves by expanding our identity, by being fundraisers for cancer research on a vehicle that meant something to us, a bicycle, I didn't invent the bicycle.
No.
But the fundraising event on a bike, yeah.
So when you went through that experience of these people who were close to you dying of cancer, did it make you think of your own mortality, your own life, how many years you had left and what you were going to do with those years?
Not then. It didn't. I was 29, healthy, a very out there kind of athlete. I thought the world was my oyster. I think more that way now. It was always about the generation above. And now it's us. I mean, I don't have to tell you, if you're lucky in life, you grow to an older age and friends die. And you can't help but think of all these things you did with these, they're part of my life narrative, and it's dozens, if not hundreds of people. And, you can't help but be impacted by, the life arc. And it's why our children will never think like us. And I didn't think like my parents. It's just, these generational things, it's great to mentor, but where these people our age, at their respective age, is age appropriate. Some people are more mature, some are old souls, some are no souls. But at the end of the day, 20 is not 60. And I remember where I was at that time, and it was all about building this event. It wasn't that my time was running out. It was how to make a mark. And, I had parents like that. I was supposed to do something meaningful.
What would you be doing now if this
I have no
happened?
idea. Unemployable. I don't know. Yes, I tell this joke about my dad. My dad was World War II generation. Again, I said sometimes if I were ever fortunate that my story were made into a movie, I pitch it as it's Sanford and Son crossed with Touched by an Angel. I worked out of my father's home, and I was a very out there, aggressive guy and a risk taker. And my dad was World War II, and he was sweet and conservative. And in 1976, pre-PMC, I'd gone into my family business, a good bit of food service equipment. My cousins are still running it. My dad was the oldest of four brothers. Their father created it. All of our cousins worked in it. There were 9 of my generation. Anyway, I worked in it, and almost immediately, I knew I was going to quit. It just wasn't for me. And I worked it for 6 months, and at the same time, I'm planning my escape, which is I'm going to walk the Appalachian Trail. I want to get back to nature. I've had this goddamn rat race. I hate it. And, but my dad, he's done all this for me. And, my brother he's 4 years older, had become a professional career journalist. And, I'd be the family legacy and the family business. And finally, but meanwhile, it's planning this trip for 4 months before I tell my dad. And I go, Dad, I feel terrible. I know you've done all this for me, but Dad, it's not for me. And he looks at me and goes, this? I never wanted this for you. You should be in some kind of high-end sales. And I go, you think you ever could have said that to me? How many people? I bet there are a lot of people who can relate to that story, but true.
You felt an obligation. I should ask you, did you feel an obligation?
We're a close family. I mean, I made assumptions.
Yeah.
He didn't share. He's World War II generation. I mean, he put a roof over our heads. He bought me a corned beef sandwich every day. He did his job. He was a loving, wonderful man. All my friends loved him.
So is that liberating for you? And he said,
oh, yes. Yes. I went and walked the Appalachian Trail with my buddy who's out in the other room, who I hired, and he rode for 10 years, and I hired him in 2000. And I know who he is. He's been here for 22 years.
Yeah, I've always wanted to. I've hiked pieces of it, but I've never done the whole thing.
I didn't do the whole thing. I did Maine and New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. But memorable, and the lessons I learned on the Appalachian Trail were absolutely incorporated into the PMC. The first lesson was a very pivotal one. It was about getting the people to buy in and share the work. When I did this, I said to the 3 guys, this is going to be great fun. I'll do everything. And I did all the food caches and all the planning. And we started on May 15th, 1976 at the northern terminus of Mount Katahdin. In that era, it's complete icing. It's winter. And that is, if you know anything about the Appalachian Trail, it's the northern 110 miles is the longest wilderness stretch. So we're packing 10 days of food. We're getting winter blowdown. We're getting lost. But we also, most significantly, had 8 straight days of nonstop rain. Now, you don't know that. We don't have Google. No longer. You just hypothermic every day, coming into a lean-to, rationing provisions, knowing that you're going X miles, anywhere from.
You look cold just talking about it.
It's a great memory, though. And at the end of that 110 miles, 2 of the guys quit. And he didn't quit. He didn't quit. He wanted to quit, but he wouldn't leave me alone. I wouldn't quit, not because I was tougher than they were, but I did all the work. And I'll never forget it. And that was the first lesson. The second lesson was the disproportionate impact of the kindness of strangers. And, as we hiked in, I'm saying to these guys, the weather's going to get bad. The weather's can't get worse, And we would have these random acts of kindness. And I could tell a lot of stories, but I'll just, give a composite story. You run to some guy, he's in there for 2 days. He's packed the kitchen sink because, if you're smart and you go and get, it's as much about the camping as it is the hiking. They got the wine, the cheese, steaks. And, they know they're carrying too much food. And they throw us a stick of cheese like we're dogs. And we were so appreciative. And I kept, oh, God, David, what a great guy he is. And I thought about that for weeks. I don't know David. I mean, why do I think he's so great? Because I was hungry and he answered the need. And it may or may not have been that big a gesture, but to me it was everything. And 3 years later, when I'm building my van, I said, I got to put that in. I know I'm going to put people in a certain amount of discomfort, but I've got to answer the need, or they ain't going to come back. So already I was thinking, this had to be more than a marathon that breaks people. It had to be sustainable. I had to build infrastructure. But those were 2 really, really critical lessons that I wanted to build into the Pan Mass Challenge.
There's a theory of decision making. I don't know if you've seen this because it's very much related to hiking and outdoor stuff, where the more committed, the more that you've done, the less you're likely to quit.
Doesn't that seem obvious?
But that's not always a good thing. Like in terms of disaster stories.
Sure.
Where people have put in all this effort and they might go further than they should have because it's like, I did all this. So it's an interesting balance.
I listened to a doctor yesterday make a comment of analysis of someone in my position. Says, you got to have passion. You got to be able to communicate it. But you also have to have the integrity not to blow it up when means that getting to the next place may destroy everything. That's an interesting lens on it. Flash forward 40 years. I know what I've built here, and I know why it's both sustainable and valuable. And I won't sacrifice that to go for an extra $5 million. I want the $5 million, but not to destroy what's been built. And it's a smart, safe, emotional, spiritual weekend. There's a lot of things behind that.
Right.
But yeah, it's an interesting point.
So at the bucket, we have this thing called the bucket age, which is basically a way to put things in perspective. So you take your life expectancy statistically, and you subtract your current age.
Subtract what?
Your current age. And you end up with your bucket age. So statistically, I got till about 85, provided I don't get hit by a bus or I don't get a disease or anything like that. I'm 61, so my bucket age is 24. And that's statistically, how much time I have left. And we use that as a way to put things in perspective. What's your bucket age?
My bucket age would be 17.
So have you ever thought about things that way?
Yes, I suppose. But I'm one of those lucky guys who created his own life narrative, still has goals, and couldn't possibly be more effective spiritually or impact the society other than consulting on exactly what I'm doing. But leading my own organization, being physically still at the near top of my game, completely vested with a lot of upside, recognizing that we're all mortal. If I can say it just slightly differently, which was not about the spiritual, it was really about the physical. What we see generationally is that I don't necessarily believe I'm going to live forever or 100 or 90, but I think I'm going to live longer, better. I think that's what me and my friends say, for those of us who think we've got that equation of health and family and physicality and spirituality. Nobody, there are better books than others, but the capricious nature of life, nobody escapes for,
Nobody gets out alive.
And I don't really enjoy those conversations, I've had more than my share of dramatic escapes or impacts that have nothing to do with anything other than, man plans and God laughs type of stuff. So while I don't consider myself a religious person, I do consider myself spiritual, and I think I've expressed it in that which I created, and I want to be doing it effectually till I don't feel I can do it well or lose the desire for it, and that hasn't happened.
Let's say that tomorrow, through your help, that cancer is cured.
Wouldn't that be something? That'd be a great punctuation mark. I'd like to go on. That'd be a pretty good party.
So what would you do after that?
Well, truthfully, I think when I started, I thought cancer would be cured in my lifetime. And the more educated you get, and there are many forms, I don't think that happens. But I think no different than the doctors who are my role models. It changes nothing. You push the ball forward. And certainly in our 40-year career to this point, PMC funding is tangible, and how the role it takes in I think we funded over 700 initiatives at Dana-Farber last year. And we document now from the doctors who ride, how much money went to your lab? What did you do with the lab? What have you learned over the last year? Then our people want to hear this. We are pushing the ball forward. And together, we achieve what none of us could do alone.
What are some of those things that you hear back when you ask that question?
It's, childhood cancers moved like from 20% curable to 85% cure. That's not insignificant. Yeah. When I see the tougher ones, the ones that barely moved, brain, pancreatic, and I think about these courageous doctors, like, how they go to work the next day. And that's exactly what I remember David Nathan in 1997, who worked with Sidney Farber in the 40s. Everyone died. How they go to work the next day, and look what they've done. So as my dear friend Patrick Byrne, who's in a lot in the news these days, says, we all rest in the shade of trees planted by others. I believe that. So we're all making an impact, and if I can make an impact riding a bike and spreading the message and raising money from people who have money to give and should be giving, pretty good life work.
Yeah. That question was about you, though. The question was, if this cause was fixed, what about you? Like, would you find another cause? Would you say this, I know this is fantasy, but it's really trying to ask you, are there other things that you want to do?
So the PANMAS challenge should definitely exist, because it's shown, so whether it's the next great social or medical issue, collaboratively speaking, and the truth is it will be chosen by the board, as to what I would want to do. If you're literally going to say, well, you got 17 years and boom, it's cured tomorrow. I would think leading this right now, I'd be putting my heads together with the best and brightest, saying, does that mean Dana-Farber is going out of business? I doubt it. Let's get real. Even when you click your heels like that,
right.
These are now brilliant people. Okay, where are they going to put their energy to? Good luck prying this event away from Dana-Farber. That's not going to happen. And that's not even Billy's call. That's the board call. We're an independent 501c3, 100% dedicated to Dana-Farber. We're 60% of the Jimmy Fund's annual revenue, this one event. We're 18 to 20% of the Dana-Farber's operating revenue. There's a lot riding on us.
There certainly is. Do you ever take a step back and say, holy shit, I did this? I know you did it with other people, but you're the reason it's here.
But you're in it every day.
Yeah.
I joke, I have a seasonal celebrity. People come up, they're very mostly congratulatory, appreciative, and it's nice. I think everybody wants validation. It's a wonderful quote. God, I gotta go look at it. I kept it. One of my favorite. It's by a former Appalachian Trail hiking record holder, and I do love it because I relate to it. I'm going to read it. You can edit as you see fit. I got to find where I do my quotes. A true legacy is not so much about performing when the whole world is watching, as it is a dedication to your cause when no one is watching. Jennifer Farr Davis, former record holder, AT speed hiker.
Wow.
I love it. That's about passion. I love what I do. I sit there, I think about it a lot. I always want to make it better. Clearly,
you have that expression, commit, you have that expression, commit, you'll figure it out.
Right.
Which obviously has worked for you and the ride. Do you think that that could be something that people use anywhere in their lives for, as you know, especially for some of the people we're trying to reach, in terms of they've gotten to a point in their life where things are in flux. They may have retired and they're trying to figure out what to do, and it's kind of they're out of their element. It seems like commit, you'll figure it out, is something.
Yeah, it can sound capricious and even frivolous, but a lot of people need a push. And at the end of the day, wherever that psychic high jump is that takes you over a bar, that makes you put forth an effort that's more than superficial, you're probably going to get more from it, and you're probably going to be more effective towards that end. So there's no question. The commit, you'll figure out, totally resonated with my crowd. When I put it on a T-shirt, people just loved it. And it's, it's words of encouragement. That's what you say to your friends. And my friends would joke with you. That's what Billy said to me. And that I'm not going to hold your hand through the whole thing. If you believe in me or my value system to some degree, you're going to get the same rewards.
Well, it seems like it helps people get out of their comfort zone because they think they're always supposed to have a plan. And it's like, no, commit, and then the plan will come.
In some cases, yes. In many cases, yes. I mean, look, we can look up on my life narrative. Yes, it wasn't a business plan. I had no underwriting. I had no buy-in. It was a epiphany that then took a plan based on my own commitment and some background in things I outlined before. You're an athlete. You understand you need food and water. You got to create a route. You've hiked the trail. Well, here's the trail. Springfield to Provincetown. Here's the trail. Well, resupply. I need people. I need police. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. It's so complicated.
But not originally.
You figured it out.
Yeah.
So
it gets more complicated if you have any level of success with it.
So is there something you have yet to do? Something, if death showed up today, you'd say, I wish I had done that.
There are many places I suspect I'm never going to get to. And, again, I think in my 20s, when my wanderlust was greatest, my personal story changed, and I didn't get out into the world as I had anticipated. I did more in my 30s. Now I like to bike in beautiful spots all over the world, but I no longer see myself climbing Everest, and I don't care. I do believe that what I'm doing right here is the most important thing I can do, regardless of temporal pleasures of drinking wine and riding my bike, both of which I enjoy very much.
What you just said, I don't know if anyone's ever said this to you. It's a little bit like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. Think about what happened to him. He was going to go travel the world. He had all these plans. His father died. And it changed, and it affected so many people.
I don't think they'll be making that movie, but I get it. And look, event programming is now a $5 billion industry. You can run, walk, swim, bike for every good cause in the sun. None has had the impact of the PMC. One of my metaphors is, is the iceberg analogy, which is that which is above the surface is the money. But the intellectual, emotional capital that's been captured in this event, the ways that people have made relationships that have bonded to Dana-Farber, the cancer community, to teams of riders, to health, to elevating people to the sport of cycling, it's huge. It's huge. I'm not going to say it's necessarily bigger than the money, but it's a quality of life issue that's elevating everybody on multiple planes. And clearly part of my audacity was I was painting on a pretty large canvas and still filling it in. You know, really think about it. Springfield to Provincetown, 220 miles. That's what it was. Make that a perfect weekend. Never going to happen. But instead, we keep morphing it, making it better, making it more inclusive, raising more money, and through our culture and mission statement, you know, if I can give the skeletal structure, 12 routes, 46 towns, 360 miles of infrastructure, 350,000 people writing checks, 11 full-time people, 14-person board, a newly created 11-person advisory board, a 14-person head staff volunteer organization with 4,000 volunteers beneath them. It's big.
It's big.
It's big.
When you started it, is this what you dreamed of? Or
I don't know.
You never had, like, couldn't even hope for this?
I think it would be unrealistic to say, you know, I hoped for a multi-million-dollar event, whatever that meant. You know, so everything we've discussed, you know, let's get down and dirty, becomes a part of that. Building a business. It's not just a nonprofit ideology. It's a business and a business model that required buy-in. And I can tell this cute story. In 1980, I went to the Jimmy Fund. Again, my lack of vision, perhaps. And I told them what I was going to do, and they go, great, good luck. But they had the wisdom to point out one woman who was a volunteer at the Friends of Dana-Farber. She wasn't an athlete. Her name was Joanne Goldberg. And she said to me, what's your mission? I said, my mission is to raise money. And she looked at me and said, so you think you're better off doing that alone? And what I wanted to do was purge my pain and ride Williamstown to Provincetown, a real pan-mass challenge, 302 miles. But instead, I think I realized not everyone was going to be an athlete like me. Even the Cancer Connection, which didn't really flesh out fully to the 90s. So I reduced it to 220 miles, and then in 1980 found a permanent home at 192 to 200 in Sturbridge. And then kept diversifying and, you know, biking from Le Mans to Armstrong, to the Tour de France, to Americans Present, to cycling, from hippies to yuppies, to cycling all us varsity athletes who now were rehabbing on bicycles from knee injuries, etc. Everything I could see was going in the direction that I was typical of the people I was attracting. You know, not extraordinary, typical. And that they could all find a place here. And then, of course, making it for people who could be comfortable, who weren't the kind of athletes that I and others were originally. So, you know, Williamstown to Provincetown by myself, 302 miles. That's what I wanted to do. But she got me, and I said, it's bullshit. It's just self-indulgent. If you just want to, you want to make a mark, get people involved. And that was a turning point.
You seem like a competitive guy.
People keep saying that to me.
Was the hey, good luck with that from the Jimmy Fund something that motivated you?
Partly, I could tell the same story about my girlfriend in 1980 on Sunday night, and we're together lying in bed at the end of the first year, and I literally turned to her and said, that's it. I'm going to make this thing big. And she looked at me and she said, it was nice, but grow up. And I said, I'll show you. I'm going to make this thing big. And he said, what motivates people? You're right, I am competitive. That annoyed me. She didn't have my vision for what mattered to me. But I get it. I mean, it just, 36 people. We did everything wrong. Everyone got lost. We ran out of food. The ferry didn't run. It was a complete disaster. But everybody was talking about next year on the bus ride home. And I'm hearing it, that I struck a chord with some of these people. They were extending their identity beyond their corporal selves.
So tell me what it felt like when you handed the Jimmy Fund the first check.
Modestly gratifying, $10,200. I don't even know if I presented that. I don't think we presented a goal in 1980. But we grew from 10,200 to 40,600 the following year. I mean, that's 400% growth. Big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal. And I could sell that. As importantly, it worked for me. It motivated me. There's tangible evidence of growth. And I could do that for a very long time.
Well, this has been great. Do you want to tell people if they want to participate next year, how they can do that?
Sure, thank you. PMC.org, read up. Registration opens I want to say January 10th to first year riders. We have a 3-tiered registration. And ride or volunteer and commit. All are welcome, but I warn you all, we sell out before the end of February.
All right, well, I hope you'll get some more riders from this podcast.
David, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about how you can support the PMC, go to pmc.org. And to learn more about how to get the most out of your life by embracing your own mortality, go to thebucket.com. That's thebucket, all one word, .com. And if you know someone you think should be on a future Bucket podcast, let us know at bucketfeedback@thebucket.com.